All right, let's not really rip the Band-Aid off. Let's just cut off the entire limb. The Cardinals lost 34-13 to the Green Bay Packers. This was about as non-competitive of a game as we have seen, and I will claim we have seen in the Jonathan Gannon era, and it was done so by their own mistakes. They had 13 penalties in this game. We went on and on last week, particularly at the end of the week. We were citing Teo Mackey's work, going through some of our own numbers as well, just how impressive they were in that department, how they didn't hurt themselves. All they did was hurt themselves in this game, and this was a game, Mitch, that I think I kind of want to start here. The Packers weren't lights out. This was a winnable game, actually, but they never stood a chance because of not only their own mistakes, but just their inability to perform on either end of the football, and then in special teams as well. It was a total disaster class. It was awful.
Did you feel the same way that I did? So they get the 7 points towards the end of the second quarter, and then they get the ball back, right? They were able to force the Packers to turn the ball back to them. And as a result, the Cardinals are able to drive down the field. They're methodical, so they take a lot of time off the clock. And no, they didn't get another touchdown, but yes, they got points on the board. And I felt that it was leading to be eerily similar to how last week went, right? Like you give yourself something to be motivated about going into the locker room, and then you come out and carry that with you into the next half. Now, they did score on their next drive to come out of the half with the field goal, but yeah, to your point, disaster everywhere else, and that's just how the game ended up being. It was just a mess all over the place.
I think a lot of the reactionary content to come out of this game is people trying to figure out what exactly this team is through 6 games. The results in these 6 games have been so varied and unique that you're kind of looking around and trying to figure out what this team is. I know what it is. It's a bad football team. I'll say it out loud. They would be 1-5 if the Niners had a kicker. They'd be 1-5 right now, and that one win, by the way, was a convincing win against the Rams, a win they would have gotten, I believe, if the Rams were fully healthy. They were not fully healthy. In fact, they were totally depleted on their offensive line, which led to by far the most productive pass rush game of the day of the year. Maybe not their best pass rush game of the year, but certainly their most productive. Their pass rush is now sackless in 2 of the last 3 games in the year. It is inexcusable in so many different areas of the field. We could talk about Kyler Murray and his connection with Marvin Harrison before he unfortunately left with a concussion. We can talk about being unable to establish the run game early, and all what that means is the game's over now. Oh, you just can't establish the run for 3 or 4 drives to start the game. Now the game's over, just like that. That is inexcusable in so many ways, and I have no reason to believe anything else but this is a bad football team. Now, guess what? There are other bad football teams in your division. So I'm not sitting here saying the season's over by any means, but it is gut check time now. If they don't turn it around in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and I don't even mean turn it around with wins, but get back to the team that they were supposed to be, get back to the team that is not only competitive but plays through an identity every week. We haven't seen that 2 out of the 3 last weeks, which is why I'm so concerned about the way they're going right now.
So you did the same thing that I did. You immediately looked back at last week and was like, well, wait, actually, this wasn't as great as I thought it was, and there was still this problem. And
we did that on Monday last week.
Literally,
we came in here and broke it into 2 segments.
It's like we don't want to disparage the win because a win's a win.
Great
and it was
win.
A great comeback, but
great.
To your point, literally, if they had a kicker, they're not going for it on 4th and 23. If they had a kicker, they're not trying all these 4th down attempts. Let's not forget the 49ers still moved the ball down the field in the second half. It just never resulted in points because they turned the ball over twice and then didn't have a kicker for a 4th and 23. That's basically what it is. 6 games in, it's starting to feel like this is the normality of the team. Because I remember Monty Ossenfort came on the station after the Commanders' loss, and he was asked by Wolf and Luke something to the ilk of, is this game and this performance the anomaly of the team? And he said, yes, absolutely. This is the non-standard. This is not how we play Cardinals football, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the problem is now we have 2 examples of those in the last 3 weeks. So are you telling me the anomaly is going to happen more often than the standard? That doesn't make sense to me at all. There's some sort of lacking transparency from the very top to us in the media, which then translates to you, the fans, as to what is the realistic expectation of this team. Now, in defense, I don't think it makes sense for people at the higher ups and at the top to just say, oh, we're a bad football team, don't expect much from us this year. But you can also glean how good a football team is going to be based on how they handle most of their offseason and their regular season.
Here's my main problem. They're really close to being 4-2 if you think about it. Think about how
Sure.
winnable that Bills game was, and think about how winnable this game was. Like, if they would have just put up some sort of offensive push in the first 18 minutes of this game to kind of hang around it a bit, they would have had 6 penalties instead of 13.
Sure.
Take away a fumble or 3 in the second half, and this is an extremely winnable game. Look, Jordan Love did not light the world on fire. This was not the absolute everything's over the top, you're getting burned time after time. It was just so much of it was not only the penalties, Mitch, but it was miscommunication. It was guys looking around and wondering, why aren't you there? You were supposed to be there. No, you were supposed to be there. What's going on? That's an age-old thing in basketball where someone has a wide-open dunk and you see 2 defenders looking at each other and being like, wasn't that your guy? I thought that was my guy. Buda's coverage on Christian Watson for that deep touchdown, it looked like he was expecting...
You reposted the video that Barnwell put on his...
Everyone's open!
Literally, 3 seconds in to an 8-second clip. 3 seconds into an 8-second clip, everybody could be thrown that ball. Everybody. That is completely inexcusable in terms of defensive coverage.
There's a key third down play when Kyler is holding on a read option and the entire line moves towards where Connor would have gotten the ball, and Kyler gets tackled 3 yards behind the line and then gets up and looks around like, what was that? He has the missed exchange with Trey Benson. Marvin Harrison Jr.'s one target before the play where he got concussed
was a miscommunication.
Again, Marvin curls in. Kyler thought he was going to keep going. It has been 3 months since training camp now. Like, what is going on? So it's a lot of my frustration here is how attainable their goals are right now for them. If they can just be somewhat consistent, particularly their offense, which is just so all over the place right now. Not even all over the place in the passing game. It's just bad. Like they're not a good team in the pass game right now, which is inexcusable. So this has just been a challenging year to watch as a fan because I wanted to see the progression. I wanted to believe. Now, I was lower on this team than a lot of people, but I still believed in the things that they were working on and building up towards going forward. I still believe in those things, to be clear. But if we're having these same conversations again in a couple of weeks, maybe I don't anymore.
They got Chargers on Monday, so they have an extra day of rest this week leading up to this one. And then right after that, they go to Miami to play the Dolphins, who may or may not have their starting quarterback and have looked miserable this year, both with him and without him, for what it's worth. They are far from the team that was lighting up the offensive scoreboards a year ago. That's a good point, because those are two teams that are kind of in the area where you would have expected the Cardinals to be, right? On the border of cracking a playoff spot and has a lot of upside or a lot of things going for them going into this year. Because the Chargers, they got a new head coach. They got a new philosophy. They've still got these very talented players. They're going about it their new way. And a lot of people are really liking what the Chargers look like this year. The Dolphins, you could say the same thing. They have this high-powered offense that the last couple of years they've gotten to the playoffs and then they've completely disappeared, shrunk, and shriveled away. But their defense is completely shaken up by a lot of their key players being gone. And the offense has looked miserable to start the year, as I mentioned, with Tua and without Tua. I think those are going to be essentially what defines or decides this season for them, to your point. Because that point, we're at 8 games, and they still have a late bye, don't they? They have like a week 14 bye. They're not going to have a lot of breaks here coming up after this Monday night game either. It's just game. They're not going to have any chance to like rest, recoup, and figure out what team they are.
It's actually a week 11 bye, which plays into our discussion even more because then it's these 4 games. Like this next month is going to decide their entire season here. Are they going to be 3-7? And we're talking about a team that already made moves at the trade deadline and already kind of cut down their losses a little bit. There's plenty of different ways you can be 4-6 and kind of be like, kind of okay, still kind of in it. Or you can turn things around. And like you said, like this is a vulnerable part of the schedule. This is not as difficult of a schedule as we thought it was 6 months ago when we were looking at this for sure.
Well, I think the Bears are kind of a different look now. Not only just how they performed in London against Jacksonville, but the last couple of weeks, that offense has very much looked in rhythm. Now, granted, it was against the Panthers and the Jaguars.
They're the best team of those 4 teams left.
And they play in a division where every team has 4 wins. Like, I don't think we should undersell how good the Bears are going to be when they come to State Farm Stadium in a few weeks.
But I'll undersell Miami and I'll undersell New York. Maybe I'll change my mind here in 45 minutes to 2 hours, depending on how the Jets look with new play calling and all that stuff, but we'll see. We haven't even brought it up yet. The injuries here were significant, and that's, I think, an unfortunate path we could be heading down, which is the injuries starting to pile up to such an extent where we can't properly evaluate this football team anymore. Mac Wilson got hurt briefly, then he came back in the game, but Kaiser White missed half the game. Bilal Nichols missed over half the game because of a stinger. Marvin has the concussion in the mid-second quarter. He's ruled out for the rest of the game. James Conner apparently is fine, and there was the cut of Gannon being asked, like, does he have an injury, and he just didn't even respond to the question, essentially, and just said, okay.
I have it right here, actually.
No, that was we were down a lot and we had to throw it.
He was
Okay,
asked,
so he can't be on the field?
yeah, so then he was asked after that, like, is he injured? And then he went, okay.
It's like, yeah, he's fine.
As in, like, I'm not answering that question. I already, like, answered that question kind of thing. Okay, then why is a trainer working on him? Okay, why is he running up and down doing wind sprints? Like, it's, okay. Evan Brown gets hurt, the starting left guard, which, by the way, Isaiah Adams was kind of filling with Tristan Colon at right guard. Now he's got to go back to left guard. Sean Murphy-Bunting hurts his neck in the early fourth quarter. He's ruled out. Starling Thomas missed a couple of plays. The injuries are really piling up to a concerning level because we're going to talk about this later in the show. With the defense particularly, they were never in a position to be afforded a guy missing the entire year like B.J. Ojulari or two like Justin Jones, essentially. So if they're looking at any sort of situations here, like remember when Kaiser White got hurt last year and we were like, oh boy, like they couldn't afford that. They are now at that point where one more guy missing any time, a game even, like Garrett Williams missing last week, we're like, oh boy. They're in that position now as a defensive team, and their offense just isn't equipped to fit the model of what the team was supposed to be. It's looking grim.